In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look back at what I consider to be 5 of the best jazz albums that were released during March of 2026. Now, discovering jazz can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. There's so much music coming out all the time, and a lot of great releases can easily slip under the radar. So with this month's series, I'm hoping to make that process a little bit easier for you. Almost like a guide to help you find some genuinely great new jazz records. In this particular installment, there's a really nice mix of styles on offer. Everything from modern London jazz fusion to Brazilian influenced projects to more straight ahead contemporary jazz. So hopefully, wherever you sit as a jazz listener, there's going to be something here for you. Right then, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. The first album I want to talk about is Chasing Shadows by Nubiyan Twist. This album was released on the 20th of March via Strut Records, and it marks the 5th studio release from the London-based collective, led by producer and band leader Tom XL. Now, if you're familiar with Nubiyan Twist, you'll know they've built a reputation for blending genres in a seamless way, and this album is no exception. You've got elements of jazz, Afrobeat, hip-hop and electronic music, all woven together into something that feels both rich and constantly evolving. One of my standout tracks here is Threads, which features the legendary Patrice Rushen on piano. This track really grabbed me straight away. The groove is incredibly tight. The drums and percussion lock in beautifully, creating this really solid foundation. On top of that, you've got these vibrant horn arrangements, layered with these tasteful synth lines that add just the right amount of texture. Everything feels very deliberate and well placed, and it all comes together to create something that sounds both polished and full of energy. And then, of course, Patrice Rushen's piano solo just elevates the whole thing. It's the perfect finishing touch. Another track I really enjoyed was Sunlight, featuring vocals from Eniola Idowu. This one leans more into that smooth, acid jazz territory. It actually reminded me of something a group like Incognito might put out. It's got that laid back, soulful feel that makes it really easy to come back to. Overall, this is a very strong album. Very cohesive, very well produced, and definitely one I'd recommend checking out if you like genre-bending jazz with a modern edge. Next up, we've got Ladeiras de Santa Teresa by Neves e Silva. This is a collaboration between trombonist and drummer Antonio Neves and percussionist Tiaguino Silva, and the album was also released on the 20th of March via Far Out Recordings. The title translates to The Hills of Santa Teresa, which is a nod to the Bohemian neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, and you can really feel that sense of place throughout the music. What makes this project particularly interesting is that it's led by 2 percussionists, and that really comes through in the rhythmic focus of the album. There's a strong foundation of Samba grooves running throughout, but it's combined with bold brass arrangements and touches of modern jazz that keep things feeling fresh. My favorite track here is the opener, Das Neves. This one has a really beautiful balance to it. The piano and horn arrangements are expressive without being overbearing, and they sit nicely on top of some excellent percussion work and some solid double bass playing. It leans more towards a traditional Brazilian jazz sound, which I personally really enjoy. About halfway through the track, there's a fantastic saxophone solo, which I believe is played by Oswaldo Lesser, and that's definitely one of the highlights of the album for me. Another track worth mentioning is Fendas Vocace. This one brings in more of a modern, slightly funkier edge, and again, the drumming really stands out. There's a lot of energy here, but it never feels chaotic. Everything is still very controlled and musical. If you're a fan of Brazilian jazz or rhythm-driven music in general, this is definitely one to have on your radar. Moving on, we've got Patternmaster by saxophonist Mark Turner. This album was released on the 13th of March via ECM Records, and it features a really strong lineup. Jason Palmer on trumpet, Joe Martin on double bass, and Jonathan Pinson on drums. This is one of those albums that leans more into the cerebral modern jazz space. It's quite intricate, quite thoughtful, and definitely one that rewards close listening. My favourite track here is actually the opening track, which is also the title track, Patternmaster. It's a really sophisticated start to the album. The interplay between Turner and Palmer is particularly impressive. They move between playing in unison and then branching off into separate melodic lines, but it all still feels cohesive. As the track develops, both musicians get the space to stretch out and express themselves through their solos. And that's where you start to hear more of their individual voices come through. Elsewhere on the album, you've got more abstract pieces like It Very Well May Be. This is probably one of the more challenging listens on the record. It doesn't really settle into a constant groove or structure. It feels quite fluid, almost unpredictable. At times, it's like the music is constantly shifting direction, almost like someone stumbling along without a clear path, but in a way that's very intentional. It creates this slightly uneasy but fascinating atmosphere. That's really where the artistic side of this album comes into play. It's not just about easy listening, it's about creating moods, ideas, and imagery in your mind as you listen. If you enjoy exploratory modern jazz, this is definitely one worth spending time with. Next, we've got Just When You Think You Know by multi-instrumentalist and composer Brian Landrus. And this might actually be my favourite album from today's selection. This one was released on the 20th of March via Blueland Palmetto Records. On this record, Landrus handles a lot of the wind instrument duties himself, including saxophone, clarinet and flute. And he's joined by Dave Stryker on guitar, Zakai Curtis on keys, and Rudy Royston on drums. One of the standout tracks for me is 1 Year. This is more of a straight-ahead jazz piece, but it's executed really well. The piano harmonies are lovely. The drumming has that slightly skippy, swinging feel, and everything just sits together beautifully. Landrus's saxophone playing here is particularly impressive. It's smooth, expressive, and fits perfectly within the overall sound of the track. There's also a really well-timed guitar solo that comes in towards the final section, which adds another nice layer to the arrangement. I also really enjoyed the title track, Just When You Think You Know. This one has a more laid-back, mellow feel to it, but it still showcases some fantastic playing, especially from Landrus. What I like most about this album is that it brings together a lot of elements that I personally look for in a jazz record. It's musical, it's expressive, it's well put together, and it just feels very complete. This is definitely one I can see myself coming back to. And finally, we've got Samba Tonto by Hendrik Meurkens. This album was released on the 20th of March via the Cellar Music Group, and it features Meurkens on both harmonica and vibraphone, which immediately gives it a slightly different flavour compared to your typical jazz record. One of the things I really enjoyed about this album is hearing the harmonica used in this kind of setting. It's not something you come across all that often in jazz, and it adds a really unique texture to the overall sound. There's also a strong Brazilian influence running throughout the album, which gives it a really warm, summery feel. My favourite track here is Herb's Samba. This one has a really breezy, relaxed vibe. The electric piano chords are warm and inviting, and they pair really nicely with the sound of the vibraphone. There are also some great trombone parts on this track, played by Justus Heyer, which add a bit more depth to the arrangement. Another highlight is Meurkens' version of Surfboard by Antonio Carlos Jobim. You can't really go wrong with a composition like that, and it fits perfectly within the overall feel of the album. This is one of those records that would work really well as a background listen, especially during the warmer months. But there's still plenty there to appreciate if you sit down and give it your full attention. So there you have it, 5 of the best jazz albums from March 2026, at least in my opinion. Hopefully you found something here that you weren't aware of before, and maybe even discovered a new favourite. So far, 2026 has already delivered some really strong jazz releases, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year has in store. If you've been listening to anything from March 2026 that didn't make this list, be sure to drop it in the comment section below. I really do enjoy checking out your recommendations. If you want to continue hanging out with me here on the channel, I'll pop a video in the corner for you to click on now. Other than that, I'd like to say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.